Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for coming. Appreciate your being here. This is a vitally important topic that affects every area of our economy, every area of our society, who we are, what kind of a nation we will be over the next 20, 50, and 100 years. So it's critically important. It's front set. We couldn't have picked a better time to talk about this given all the debates that are going on in Washington right now about immigration. And so we were inspired to do this study because we care a lot about what's going to happen to the U.S. economy. And so I have with us Richard Vedder, who many of you know as one of the top economists in the country. He is, are you still teaching at Ohio? What are you? What is your status at Ohio?
I teach. They don't pay me. I refuse to go away.
We love Richard because he works cheap. Just kidding. He and I work together at the adjoining. Yeah, exactly. Can't get around the old minimum wage. And so Rich Vedder has written about migration issues, economic issues, immigration issues, state policy, all of these things. So he's been really one of the world's experts on immigration. Dennis Nixon is with IBC Bank. He is so knowledgeable about how important immigration is to the economy in Texas and around the country. And so I wanted Dennis to, he's the one who brought me to the border in Laredo, and boy, was that an eye-opening experience to see all the goods and services that come in over that border. And so we'll each maybe speak for 10 minutes, and we'll talk about the study and et cetera, and then we will take whatever questions and comments that you have. We want this to be as interactive as possible. So, Rich, why don't you start? We need more people to do that.
We need that. That's another thing we need, more babies. This is probably not the occasion to try to promote that or at least an orgy at 300
Let's stay on the subject.
Yeah. He's getting in the gutter already. It's been 1 minute into the presentation. So let me just say 5 factoids. This study is filled with interesting stuff. I just take 5. Can you hear me better now? Here's 5 factoids from the study. There are many others, but I just picked 5 out almost randomly. Nearly half of the growth in the labor force of the United States over the last decade, half, has been immigrants. 48%, I think. Factoid number 2. If native-born Americans had the same propensity to work as immigrants, we would have 11 million more workers in the American economy right now. 11 million more. That's a lot. 3, immigrants or their children were importantly involved in the creation of 47% of the top 500 companies as measured by the Fortune 500. 47%. That's not only the immigrants themselves, but the children of immigrants. The children of the immigrants are the ultimate force. I mean, the quantum force, I think, more than any generation of people. Fourth, of the original magnificent 7 high-tech trillion-dollar companies, and now we added an 8th recently with Broadcom. There are 8 companies over $1 trillion in capitalization. 4 of those 8, their CEOs are immigrants. 4 out of 8, half of them. So we're at the cutting edge of economic progress in the United States. Fifth, per capita income in the 10 states in the Union with the largest proportion of immigrants is 40% higher than in the 10 states in the Union with the lowest proportion of immigrants. High immigrant states had per capita income roughly $72,000 versus $52,000, $20,000 higher income. Now, I'm not going to claim that immigration was the cause of all of that, but it shows that immigrants have been highly associated with the most dynamic aspects of the American economy. If all of the Americans were like immigrants, we would be tearing this world apart. We are to some extent, but we would be doing it a lot more. We would be worried quite as much about China. We wouldn't be worrying quite as much about Russia. Let's keep to domestic policy and not get into foreign policy. So that is my message. I wrote my first paper on immigration and migration in 1970, and I gave my first paper on immigration at the Soviet Academy of Sciences in then Leningrad, at the Tarita Palace in Leningrad, gorgeous place, by the way. And by the way, going to an academic meeting in Russia is really an experience. At the opening banquet of the 1,100 people who showed up, 500 of them at least were on the floor before the evening was over because everyone got a full bottle of vodka to drink, and most of them did. I've been in this immigration game for a long, long time. And in my early studies, I argued, where do immigrants move when they come to the United States? Well, they go where the jobs are, where the job opportunities are. We say the same thing today. Immigrants had lower crime rates. Everyone said, oh, immigrants are a bunch of criminals. And, you know, obviously there are some immigrants who are criminals, but they're relative to the American population, that's just a false statement. So most of the characterizations of immigrants in a negative sense are false or minimally exaggerated. And we have been blessed from day one, 1607. By the way, you know, those first people who came here were immigrants and have been immigrants. The nation has lived on immigration. John F. Kennedy, he didn't actually say it. He said it on a book title, A Nation of Immigrants. Someone ghost wrote the book for him. But the Kennedys are a good example of an immigrant family. And there are people, the Carnegies, and you just go on and on and on. This nation was really built on immigration. And why we are turning our backs on immigrants is beyond me. And sure, we should deal with illegal immigration. We should stomp out people who break the law. But we need to stimulate legal immigration, and we could do it. And if we here's my idea. Can I give my idea? I'm going to do it.
I heard it, so I'm a little nervous.
No. I'm going to do it anyway. I have tenure. If we let into the United States every business day of the year, 250 business days of the year, if we sold 8,000 visas on the New York Stock Exchange, pure market, I don't know what they would bring. the idea is the holders of these visas would have the equivalent of a green card right away and then have a path to citizenship. Somewhat similar to the Trump golden visa idea. We sell them on the market. What will people pay? Well, people pay $20,000, $25,000 to cross the border illegally. Dennis probably, I'll let Dennis speak to that. You're in the king of that area. You're the experts on this. If they'll pay $25,000 to come in this country illegally, wouldn't you think they pay maybe $50,000 a year to get a right to citizenship ultimately? And I think they would. Do the math. 8,000 a day, 250 days a year. That's 2 million visas. At 50,000 apiece, that's $100 billion. Over 10 years, that's $1 trillion. What would $1 trillion do to the current budget hassle that we're having in Washington right now? It would lower the deficit, you get rid of the deficit, you could make big fights over SALT deductions and all this other trivial stuff would, I would say totally disappear, but be dramatically reduced. And every day you could see, how is America doing? We would read, visas were up $250 today because of a proposed new tax cut. Or visas were down $400 today because of Mississippi River flooding. We get a value on the American society, a dollar market, a market value. Wouldn't that be cool? I think so. I've said enough. My 10 minutes is up.
Better. Okay, so let me kind of dovetail off of that. First of all, just to be clear, we're talking about legal immigration, not illegal immigration. I'm good friends with Tom Homan, who is the fourth an amazing job in terms of in just 3 months, we've basically secured the border, which is something Americans desperately wanted to see. So I congratulate them. He's done a very humane way, and I've always believed that once you got the border secure, that I think Americans will be in favor of a lot of the immigration policies that we endorse in this study. So we're really focused on people who come in the lawful way, and one good way to reduce illegal immigration is to increase visas for legal immigration. By the way, we know that from history that when we've opened the doors wider, illegal immigration goes down, and we restrict legal immigration, the legal immigration goes up. So now is a good time for us to expand legal immigration. Now, one of the themes that I want to emphasize is that, I've worked very closely with Donald Trump over the last 8 years. I was senior economic advisor to Trump. I've talked very closely. I'm in constant contact with the people at the Treasury and the people at the Council of Economic Advisors. I mean, see, they're all friends of mine. We're talking constantly. The goal for many of the problems we face in the country right now, including the massive deficits that are So the goal is to solve a lot of problems, especially the massive debt problem, is to increase the economic growth rate to 3%. And if we can increase the economic growth rate to 3%, I see my friend Grover Norquist is in the back here. Grover understands this. The faster we grow the economy, the more we reduce the deficit. If you get a 3% growth rate, you're going to reduce the debt over the next 10 years by somewhere between $2 and $3 trillion. So that would have a bigger impact than all of the spending cuts they're talking about. So economic growth is absolutely critical. Now, one of the main points we make in the study is that, and I learned a lot of my economics from Richard Vedder, economic growth is, if I get this wrong, economic growth is basically associated with two major things. One is the number of people who are working in the country, and the second is the productivity of the workers who are working. And immigration contributes to both of those things, productivity of workers and obviously adding to the labor force. The key statistic that Rich Vedder just cited, which really blew me away, by the way, when we started, the two of us have worked on this issue for 30 years. I hadn't looked at the data over the last 10 years, so I was I was not sure what we would find, and some of the statistics really did blow me away, that almost half of all net new workers in the U.S. economy over the last 10 or 15 years have been due to the foreign-born coming here and working here. So, and there's no question right now, if you look at the labor situation, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dennis, but that we do not have a shortage of jobs in this country. We have a shortage of workers. There's no question about it. There's 6.5 million job openings, and we're going to get a lot more as the economy continues to improve. There are 10,000 Americans who are retiring every single day. 10,000. I was born in 1960. That was the peak year for births. And ever since then, birth rates have come down. And so when you have 10,000 people retiring every day, I guarantee you there are not 10,000 Americans entering the workforce every day. And so the way, now, another related point to this. The single biggest issue in the whole world that nobody's paying attention to, it's a catastrophic development, is the massive reduction in birth rates around the world. And we are old enough to remember the what was it, the population bomb and all that? We're not facing a population bomb today, we're facing a population implosion, especially in every single developed country in the world. There may be one or two exceptions, but birth rates in Europe, birth rates in Japan, Korea, even China now has an inverted pyramid. They have a massive number of older people and fewer younger people to support them. There's one country in the world that has a demographic safety valve, and that's the United States. Because we're the one country in the world that everybody in the world wants to come to. So we can essentially import young people. One of the economic advantages of immigration that's often overlooked is the age profile of immigrants. Immigrants come to the United States when they are young. So the typical immigrant comes into the country between the ages of 18 and 40, right in the sweet spot. It means that we didn't have to pay their expenses, in terms of their rearing and their education. Other countries, immigration is a form of reverse foreign aid, right? They educate these people and then they come to the United States and we get them, and we get their work. So there's no way we can get to 3% growth, I'm going to say it again, unless we continue to allow immigrants in at a rising pace. Right now we let in about 1 million per year. There's no doubt in my mind we could easily double that and absorb that number very easily. I like Richard Vedder's idea of, this is now really being discussed in the White House, which is, they call them what do they call those? Just put them up for auction. And I'm not saying we get rid of all the other categories. This should be on top of the current immigration system. I think, by the way, some of these people would pay $5 million for a U.S. passport. Let's see what the market. Absolutely. Let's see what the market. To have an auction system. And but there are other couple of programs that I want to mention because we feel strongly about them. One is there's a seasonal worker program. Makes a lot of sense. I don't know the exact number, about 150 to 200,000 come in 4 or 5 months for the year. If you go out to the eastern shore here for the beaches, you're going to find that most of the people are working as waiters, waitresses, people in the kitchens, people, the lifeguards, Eastern Europeans, and so on. It's a great program. They don't take jobs from Americans. They come for 4 months. They make a good paycheck, and then they go back, and then they come back. So we want to make sure. And by the way, does anybody know which employer in this country, the most famous employer in the country that uses these seasonal worker visas? Donald J. Trump. Because Trump, right? He couldn't run Mar-a-Lago and his compound there in New Jersey without them. So we should do that. We have another program called the EB5 program that we really promoted, and that's similar to what you were talking about. These are people who invest, I think the amount, I don't remember, I think it's $1 million. Is it $1 million? Yeah, $1 million, and you have to create a certain number of jobs, like 10 jobs, and you have to do that in either a inner city or a rural area that's been depressed. And that program has worked very well, so we should continue to expand that. And then, the H-1B visas, which are the brainiacs, as Larry Kudlow calls them, is an important one, too. One last point, and then I'll turn it over to Dennis. For those of you who get our hotline in the morning, you may have seen this, but it's a pretty amazing statistic. Anybody who's watching the NBA playoffs, we're in the championship series right now, can relate to this. The United States, have every great basketball, the greatest basketball players in the world play here in the NBA. I don't know if you're aware of this. The last 7 NBA MVPs have been foreigners. The last 7 from Cameroon, from I think what's his name, Gilbert, the guy on the Oklahoma City. It's a hard name to pronounce. He's from Canada. So it's amazing. And it's a little microcosm of how we really truly get the most talented people in the world. And that's like exactly what's happening in Silicon Valley. Many of the most talented people who are inventing all these incredible products in AI, robotics, and so on, they are immigrants. So they're not just forming the companies, but they're also working for them. So for all these reasons, we want more legal immigration, more visas for legal immigrants, secure the border, get rid of the bad people, get rid of the criminals, get rid of the drug runners, but let's open the doors wide. And so the person who knows more about this on the front line than anybody I know is Dennis Nixon, because Dallas or Houston, where's your home? Laredo. Okay, because I met up with you at Dallas, but Dennis brought me down to Laredo. If you've never been there, it's the most amazing experience to see what's really going on at the border and how dependent we are, not just on immigrants, but also the produce and all of the products that come in across that border. So tell people about your perspective on this whole issue.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you very much for including me in the process. And I want to congratulate you and your team once again for bringing this new document forward, because people need to understand, and you've done a good job of putting this perspective in place. And so it's really important, especially now when we have so much controversy over immigration. Unfortunately, I got involved in it a long time ago because of the workforce issues, and I thought this was naturally a conservative issue because we're workforce people and we want to see the country grow. And as you pointed out, people plus productivity equals GDP. You don't have any people, you're not going to have any growth. And so you got to have those people in the country to grow. We all want to grow. We all want to be able to succeed and prosper in the future. And so the immigrants are a key part of that. And this tragedy of demographics that Steve alluded to, which I think is the elephant in the room, it started a long time ago with a guy that wrote the population bomb, Paul Ehrlich. And he was basically an environmentalist, and all the things he talked about were basically false. All the demographers at the time basically said he doesn't know what he's talking about, and he promoted that idea. And that's the scary part of what I see. And what I see today is misinformation campaigns and false stuff gets put out. And now with social media, we even do it at a higher level than we've done in the past. And I see on the border, I've lived on the border since 1970. My office is within an eye shot of the border, and my home is a few miles north of that. We've seen the border go from basically a backward country like third world to now a modern society because of trade and all the things that have gone on since the NAFTA and then the USMCA agreements have come in place. And we've seen the growth of the North American economy dramatically improve. We're approaching $30 trillion, 500 million people in this economy at the north. Mexico, Canada, the United States, people are prospering. And so we can grow and develop, but we do need the people. And so when I saw the things going on in trade, we never really addressed the need for the people to come here and work here and be a part of this economy. We have free flow of trade and materials and products, but we don't have free flow of people and the ability to manage that. So all of this has to be managed. So a lot of people want open borders and want the free flow, and I think Biden, with all, proved that that doesn't work. You get too many bad people coming into the economy along with the good people who just want to come here and work and contribute to society. So we're very much interested in promoting solid immigration reform. And so one of the battles we've had over the years is everybody wants to secure the border, and I say, how do you secure the border until you have good immigration reform? Because immigration reform should be matching the workforce that we need to the people that we admit, and that we should be in charge of our immigration, not have the coyotes and all the people who prosper from illegal immigration be in charge of our immigration policy. That's what's been going on for the last several decades. We don't control the immigration. The cartels of the people who manage these people coming across manage that for us. And so then we're about catch and release and all the other things that go on with all the negatives concerning the border. So as one who's lived through this, lived through the Biden administration, We have banking offices. I'm in the banking business. We're the largest bank headquartered on the Texas-Mexican border. We have branches that run all the way from Del Rio, Texas in the west to Brownsville, Texas in the southeast. We basically hug the Rio Grande River, and we've watched and seen the development of this area over the years that have gone from, as I said, almost a third world country status to now a modern community with dynamic growth and dynamic prosperity based almost solely on trade and the development of trade. So people who don't want us to continue with USMCA and cut off these trade agreements don't realize that above all, it's made us competitive. One of the things that we cannot forget, if we can control all the things we want to do in the United States, if we can't be competitive with the rest of the world by doing outsourcing and using the resources of offshore folks, we're not going to stay competitive. So we must do that. But as Steve pointed out, and you pointed out, we have to have people in this country to be able to succeed. And when we have birth rates below 1.7, it takes 2.1 births per female to maintain the population. All of the developed countries of the world have fallen below that. So we're gradually running out of people in terms of workforce. And then we have labor participation rates that are 62%, which is terrible. We need people in these jobs, and people are out all the time trying to create jobs. As Steve pointed out, we don't have enough people to fill the jobs now. So we want to bring all this manufacturing and all this stuff back to the United States, and we already have 500,000 shortage in manufacturing jobs, people to fill those jobs. The jobs are there, but there are no people to fill them. And by 2033, I've seen data that says that number will rise to 2 million. And that doesn't consider all of the effort we're having right now bringing jobs back to America. So personally, I think that the best solution for us is massive immigration reform, matching people to our workforce needs, organized and managed based upon our standards and our values, and also the fact that we want to continue to develop the North American trade community, because that's how we can build the economy of the future of using all the resources of all three countries. Mexico has some competitive advantages. Canada has some competitive advantages. We have competitive advantages. When we put them together, the process is far better than it is alone. So we talk about automobiles. How do we build an automobile today that's competitive in the world? So if we bring it all back to the United States and we end up with high-cost cars, we might be able to buy them in the United States, but who's going to buy them in the export market? If somebody builds a car using outsourcing, the Japanese or the Germans or anybody, they're going to underpin our ability to be competitive. And one of the things that I get frustrated in all this discussion, especially when it comes to tariff and trade, at the end of the day, you have to be competitive. You can do all the hometown stuff you want, but if you can't produce a product and beat your competitor, you're not going to win. So any of us that are in business understands that. I've been in the banking business for 60 years, believe it or not, and I've been CEO of my company this year 50 years. And in that period of time, I've had to be competitive every year I've been in business. And if I'm not, I lose my business to my competitors. So anything that we do in this country that does not maintain focused on being competitive, we're going to get behind the 8 ball, and it'll just be a matter of time before we lose our way. The way we stay competitive is by using all of these resources where people have comparative advantage, and we can access them and manage that, and that we access the immigrants of this world. As Steve pointed out, people want to come here. We can be selective on how we bring them here and how we use those immigrants. I believe we need somewhere around 650 or 700,000, as I would call, basic workers, the guys who do the women who do the dirty work in our kitchens, our hotels, our golf courses, all the things that go on every day that we don't want to do in America today. I am over 200 people short in my company today because we can't find people to work. Over 200. I have a workforce of about 2,200 people. So we're about 10% short, and we continuously work to try to build our ability to retain people, keep people. But when you don't have that workforce available, you can't make it work. And in our part of the world where there's a lot of ranching and agriculture and other things going on, a lot of what I would call dirty jobs going on, finding people to take those jobs today is near impossible. Talk to anybody in the trades, construction companies, talk about people in our warehousing area, our logistics centers, trying to get people to find in those jobs. It's just practically impossible. So great job, Steve, on this paper. You've done a wonderful job, and hopefully people will take it to heart and do something with it. We do need this workforce, and we have to recognize the demographic problem we're facing. You look at places like Japan, by 2050, they will have lost 25% of their population. Lost 25% of their population. And we're in the same boat. Our fertility rate in this country is down below 1.7 now. There's been no country that's been able to turn that around. There's a couple of their tribes, Singapore, France, but they've never been able to move the dial. And once that happens, you're basically stuck with the downward momentum of that process. And as Steve said, the only way we can overcome that is because we're such an attractive place to come and really work. We can attract the immigrants from around the world.
By the way, one of the things we found in the study is that even though we have a low birth rate, it would be lower if it weren't for immigrants, because immigrants have higher fertility rates than Americans do. So let's open up for questions, comments. Maybe we can start with Grover in the back.
One question is, do other countries find immigration as valuable to them, or is it what we do here that makes immigrants more valuable? But I think I hear people talk about immigration and they get mad at two things. We have welfare, which keeps people from going to, native-born Americans from going to work, and then they say the reason they're not working is some immigrant took their job when they're enticed by welfare not to get the job. And organized labor prices labor above the market and then has to set up tariffs to protect that. They lose jobs not to China but to southern states that have right to work. So we have very flawed labor law, thank you labor union bosses, and we have very flawed welfare programs, and that people see the problems there and then decide that's immigrants, when in point of fact it's completely different.
Well, I'll take a stab at this first. I mean, my position has always been immigration, yes, welfare, no. So the deal should be if you want to immigrate to the United States, we've got a great deal for you. We've got the jobs that are available. You can make a great life for yourself. But I don't think, people who come in and immigrate to the United States should be eligible for welfare programs. I don't think. And by the way, there'd be no shortage of people who want to come under those conditions. So that's one thing. The second point I would make that we didn't really get into the study, but it really is important. Immigrants are very, very valuable in terms of their effect on the fiscal situation. And that is because as soon as immigrants come in, those 19, 20, 21-year-olds who you hire, they immediately start paying payroll taxes, Social Security taxes. And yet they don't come, if they come with their parents aren't eligible for the program. So there's this one generation benefit for the program, because by the time they retire, then they have kids who are paying into the system. You see, so if you want to solve the Social Security problem in the shortfall, you need continued immigration, no question about it. And that is a big, factor in keeping the system solvent. But I don't know if you guys have any comment on that.
I agree exactly with everything Steve said, of course. There's something that's a little amusing that's tangential to this but relates to it. There are some people out there who are really pro-immigrant, but they're afraid to say so. They're afraid because they may offend certain groups. My best example, you have to remember a guy named Bill Clinton? Bill Clinton was president of the United States. William Jefferson Clinton, don't forget the Jefferson. Bill Clinton, on page 453 of his latest book, co-authored with a novelist called James Patterson, on page 453 of the book called First Gentleman, Bill Clinton, the fictional president of the United States in this book, says we need more immigrants, and says we need 1 million more a year, and we ought to get out there and get them, and it'll solve all kinds of welfare problems, public assistance problems. This is what the Bill Clinton novelist is telling us. Whether he actually wrote that or not, who knows? But there is a public out there, I think, that when they examine the matter closely, realize there's a lot of win-win here.
On that note, I've been looking at survey data for the last 50 years on this issue. If you ask people, what do you think about immigration in general, most Americans are in favor of immigration, but they're a little uneasy about it, as your point is. If you ask them, what do you think about the immigrants you know personally? Oh, it's off the charts. Oh, they were fantastic people. So some of it is kind of the unknown quality. But let me kind of throw this over to you, Dennis. Legal immigrants. Does the quality of the work
are here to work. They're looking for a way to find success in life that they have not been able to find where they came from. And so there's also a terrible myth out there that they're all going to be Democrats.
The two things that I'm very much concerned about is what is the investment we're making in Americans that are here, right? Because if we continue to just leave the social state as it is, right, that we have these concentration of people that are under perform, right, and this see America doesn't work for them, right? Yet we have this major investment we could make, and I believe we need a balanced approach, right? Because the opportunity for the American worker is this transforming economy, which I hear nobody talking about, right? Where we need more analysts, more kinds of people. So I think the two things we have to look at and would like you to comment on is, one, what investment do we make in American workers to make sure they're skilled for the new economy? And then second of all, we need to reform the social state, right? We just can't continue to give people handouts and expect that they're going to be part of the society. And the third is the endowments, right? Where we have let all this money accumulate in a tax-free status and not doing the things that it should do, and maybe that is a source of the revenue to come back and help American workers.
Yeah, I think clearly you've got to do all the above. That's factual. I mean, we need to do more to enrich our workforce and give them opportunities to succeed. But we have a raw numbers problem here. So that's why we got to do all the above. We've got to bring people into the workforce who heretofore for some reason because of social support or the idea that you can get welfare indefinitely without having to work if you're able-bodied. We've got to stop those things. We've got to get our labor participation rate up at least into the mid-60s to be successful. But we have a raw numbers problem. If we have 1 million unfilled jobs in this country, we've got to find ways to get people to work, and then we've got to bring people in to help that process and create a competitive environment where people want to participate, and that's not what's happening today.
The employment population ratio, which is similar to what we're talking about, the percentage of adults who work, say between the ages of 16 and 65, what percentage work? In 2000, and I'm going from memory here, and I'm a million years old, so my memory is almost as old as Grover back there. I'm older than you, Grover. In 2000, we had 66% of Americans working in this employment population. It went down to 60 over time. Part of it because of these things we're talking about here. Malfunctioning welfare system, for example. We're paying people not to work, that sort of thing. That has grown apace in the last generation or two. So we got to stop that. We got to reverse that. And we can do it partly by reforming the welfare system. We can do it through a lot of these things that were mentioned. And we should do those things. But immigration is easy. There are people begging to come into this country. If we did what I suggested and, tack on an extra fee or so and brought in a lot of immigrants, we could use some of that money for immigration enforcement. We could use some of this money for border enforcement. We could do all that. But we also could then have the resources to do other things. Keep low taxes, for example. The Trump tax cut 2017. Are we going to maintain that or not? All those problems don't totally disappear, but they're eased enormously by immigration. We should do it.
Great.
Just with regard to we need to help the American people, just looked it up. There are already thousands of government training programs. So that's not where the shortage is or the problem is. Every time, like NAFTA, when they put it in, the first thing they did was create hundreds of training programs. And I assure you, they're not effective. But that is said, what do you say to Steve Miller? I mean, we're all mostly in agreement, but what can we say to him?
Well, Stephen Miller's a friend of mine. I worked on the campaign with him in 2016. He's a smart guy. He and I don't necessarily see eye to eye on immigration. I think what we need to do is, the tricky issue is, what do you do about illegal immigrants who are here working? And they haven't broken any laws except coming in illegally. I don't know what the best solution to that is. I don't think deporting them is necessarily the right situation. I do believe we should deport the bad actors. But look, most of the immigrants in this country are legal. They're not illegal. And so my view is competition is a good thing, that Americans have to compete with immigrants raises everybody's game. Just like in the NBA, having the top people. The one thing I would add to what you were saying is that if you look over time, what you tend to find is immigrants, when they come in, all the qualities that you described: hardworking, incredibly industrious, often entrepreneurs, starting little businesses. But one of the greatest benefits of immigrants is the children of immigrants, because the children of immigrants tend to be unbelievably successful in the country. And then you get a regression to the mean. And so if you don't have immigrants, you're not going to have the children. So when you talk, in the study, we talk about all these businesses that were started by immigrants. Many of them were, but even more were started by the children of immigrants. So I don't know if you have anything to
Yeah, I mean, Henry Ford was a child of an immigrant.
I didn't know that.
Did you know that? Yeah, I must admit I didn't know that myself, but he was born in Nova Scotia or somewhere. I mean, his father was or something. Generation after generation of people, of great entrepreneurs. Who are the great entrepreneurs? We mentioned Carnegie a little bit ago. A lot of them are immigrants, but a lot of them are children of immigrants. Of the 47, one of our factoids here, about half of those people running Fortune 500 companies are immigrant or their children. About half of those are the kids. It's not the immigrants, it's the kids. That is the ultimately most successful generation in history. After the second, as Steve says, after the second generation, they learn American habits and become a little less entrepreneurial, a little less hardworking. The first generation works like the dogs, but they don't often have the language skills, the interacting skills. They don't have the top jobs, so they're at a bit of a disadvantage. They overcome a lot of it in the course of their time here.
Just quickly, I believe we need comprehensive immigration reform which addresses all these elements. I think some of it can be handled by visa activities, but you need a pathway and a process in place where people come, they spend a certain amount of time on an immigration status, and then they build their ability to eventually possibly move to legal status and the citizenship. some people say, well, we never want to be their citizens, but I believe it's sort of like the rental car thing. You know, do you want to own the car or do you want to rent the car? And the people who own the car seem to take care of it better than the people who rent the car. So I think when you talk about people being here and having a right to achieve citizenship at some point, you're creating a bedrock institutional value there that lives on forever and ever. If you never let them have that option, then they don't go there. But I think a lot of people were just happy to come because we are the best place in the world to live and work and to succeed. The American dream still is alive, and people want that. So I think there's plenty of opportunities. But we have to have comprehensive immigration reform, well thought out, and put into law because all these little programs are burdensome, bureaucratic, difficult, time-wise to get done. When you try to bring somebody in from the country, it's a bureaucratic mess, and you spend fortunes on paperwork and legal processes, and it's very aggressive. We just can't operate that way.
So, you know, we have a bunch of visa programs that should be expanded. We have the H-1B program, which is a no-brainer. Those are the brainiacs, the people working in Silicon Valley. Although some people oppose that program, I don't quite understand why. But these are, you know, highly skilled computer experts and technology people and engineers. So, wouldn't you agree that's pretty much a no-brainer? Yeah. It's just it's all gravy to us. It's a huge benefit to the country. But then you have, I mean, you want to stop illegal immigration? Let's have an agriculture program that just lets you know, when we did that in the 50s and early 60s, we had zero illegal immigration. So I do believe the zero program, right? So now that got a bad name because some of the abuses of the program, but for the most part, it's successful. We also need, you know, I mentioned the EB-5 program. I mean, why wouldn't we let people who want to come in, invest $1 million or $2 or $3 million, go into an inner city? We have a lot of examples in our piece about, you know, these amazing businesses that have been started, and you know, it gets to your point about what were we doing for the native-born Americans. Well, if you invest $1 million in inner city Detroit and you help create jobs there, that's going to benefit natives. So, but I agree with you entirely. We need more people.
One thing on just the quality of the immigration people status is I'm on the board of MD Anderson and the board of visitors in Houston, largest leading cancer center in the world. 1 in 6 of our scientists are born in the United States. One in six born. 1 in 6. All 5 others outside the United States.
5 out of 6 are
One
foreign
of the
born.
6 are born in the United States.
Wow, that's amazing. All right, any more? We're running out of time. Hold on, let me.
Why wasn't education included in your study? I mean, we've got 1.1 million international students studying in the U.S. They bring tremendous value to our economy, and they've been educated and learned language, all of that. Why wouldn't we want to pursue them into legal immigration pathways?
Well, yeah, somehow I'm responsible for leaving that out, I guess. I don't know, Steve. Don't blame me. No, it's a good question. As a university professor, I don't know how any university, we're finding this with this Trump attempt to end foreign visas and so forth. Harvard, you know, would not exist without foreigners. And even my little rinky-dink mid-quality state university in the middle of Appalachia, we would die if we didn't have immigrants here. So we should, and why didn't we do it in the study? I don't know. Well, I do know. We wanted to get this thing out in a timely fashion. We had a little bit of time and we had limited resources. If we could make this 50 pages instead of 25 or 30, we also wanted a study that was easy for people to read and they could read quickly. And yeah, we would have, it's a great suggestion.
So, just a couple quick thoughts. One is I want to thank the people who made this study possible. One was our supported this. Another is Stand Together. So thanks so much for helping support this. And then the other was Rural Foundation. So we're very grateful for their financial support to do this. And hopefully this will be the first of many studies. And you make a good point about, you know, we bring these people to some of the top universities around the world, then we make them go home. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It's just stupid.
Stupid.
Okay, we've got time for one or two more quick questions. Somebody who hasn't, then you will promise that.
These facts presented, but it looks to me like the arguments are having to swim upstream in today's environment. Somebody said, how do you sell it to Stephen Miller? But it goes way beyond that, because there seems to be a perception in the public, immigration is bad and NAFTA is bad, and both concepts are wrong. I worked on the framework agreement that led up to NAFTA, and I know a little bit about it. And that's my one point of major divergence with our president. But how do we sell these arguments?
And I think the studies are clear. Americans love our heritage. They understand the contributions that we must make. Now, there are some who feel very strongly about it, but I do think, on balance, these have to be I think most would say yes. The problem is that, frankly, and I'm not a special partisan person, but no president in modern times has destroyed our immigration system other than the United States. I was saying anybody can come in, they get loans, they can we have to have a secure border. We just have to. And once you get that, I think Americans will
I agree.
Yeah, basically, the border's secure. I mean, the actions Trump took just dropped this thing down to a trickle, and the reality of it is sending people back when they come here and they don't have a right to be here has stopped it. People have had to pay 6, 10, 12, 15. Some of the Asian people are paying as much as $50,000 to cross the border, controlled by the cartels. They have no ability to repeat that cost. And so they gave up. Social media says stay home because you're going to be set back, you spend all that money, all that risk, and it's over. I mean, one of the big areas where it was always in the newspapers and on TV was Eagle Pass, Texas. And the reality of it is there's no people coming. And because you get set back and you've spent $10,000 or $15,000 that you've had to put together for maybe 7 or 8 or 10 years and then make that trip and you've lost that money, you don't do it again. And so the economics of this thing with Trump's actions have killed it, and now we need a process that's going to grow the immigrant population by reasonable immigration reform, which we just have not been able to get done.
we should have North America as one big free trade zone, no question about it. I think everybody done. Okay, one last. These two, and then we'll. So you go, and then you go, and then.
Fair higher education system, right? We're not producing graduates when more than half of our graduates are non-STEM, and we are non-STEM. So our college and university system is still a liberal arts system in a tech-based world. So we've got to make that investment to encourage people, and because the worst thing we're doing for people right now.
What's wrong with our universities? Why are they becoming a sociologist?
I have a book on that. If you just came out. You got another hour? I spoke for an hour yesterday. I was speaking on that. Hell. Yeah. No, he's absolutely, totally right. Our universities are totally dysfunctional now. I've been teaching for 60 years. I was teaching on the day John F. Kennedy was assassinated, on November 22nd, 1963. That's over 60 years ago. I was in the Old Testament of the Bible. So absolutely, we've lost our way. Universities have lost their way, and I've written a 200-page book, but I think we're out of time, so I can't go into detail. What is the name? Let Colleges Fail, the Power of Creative Destruction in Higher Education.
Last question, then we'll.
You mentioned that if we had a labor force participation rate like what these immigrants sort of bring, that there could be potentially millions more people working in America. I think a lot of our friends on the populist side say that, look, if we restricted immigration, it would create what they would call a tight labor market. Employers would be forced to raise wages, and they would get all these Americans working. What's wrong with that description?
Nobody better. So, you know, aren't they going to hold down wages, and isn't that going to be bad for American workers?
That's always the answer to everything, and everything that we've seen in our surveys with people coming and going, wages becomes really the second, third, or fourth big element in somebody's life. They want a job that's meaningful, a career that's meaningful, and they want work that's useful to them and the people around them. And so that process just doesn't work, and it's really a myth that's been created by those people who think you could just turn a dollar number on and you're going to solve the problem. You don't solve the problem that way.
No, he's absolutely right. The empirical evidence does not.
On wages, what's the empirical evidence?
What, you know, I'm 84 years old. I don't remember all this stuff up here. But the basic data show wages are not depressed by immigration. Indeed, the period in American history where we had tremendous immigration, between, say, 1870 and 1920, before we even had immigration restriction, was a period of the greatest growth in wages in this country's history. It was a period when we went to becoming the #1 nation in the world. This nation was built on immigration, and wages went up a lot in that period. People bought their first car in that period. They got their first toilet, indoor toilet in that period. I could go on and on and on. Not that immigration isn't the reason we have indoor plumbing, but it contributed to it. It really did.
Good point. All right. Thank you, everybody. The study is available online, and appreciate everybody coming on out today. And we are going to increase legal immigration and make American economy great again. Thank you.
We got to go pretty quick. I want to say it's over, but it's.
I'm going to show you 5 ways to style my girl, the chain tabby. Quiet luxury is out the window. Maximalism is back in. Never forget, if you have a tabby, like something classic in your closet, that's all you need.
I think being an athlete requires versatility, and so I approach my style with that. I'm always looking for something new, something different, something that expresses me.
Good morning. Welcome to this inaugural prayer and worship service. Secretary Hegseth wanted to bring us all together so that we could praise and worship together, and it's a full house. Welcome to everyone who's joining.